The air crackled, thick with the promise of a lightning strike, but the sky was an empty, metallic gray. We were tracking a magnificent bull elk, and my clients were getting restless. Arthur Cole, a quiet lawyer, stayed patient, but Marcus Dunn, a loud man who measured everything in dollar signs, wasn't having it. "Are you sure this isn't just a very expensive hike, Carter?" he grumbled, his breath puffing out in a white cloud. Before I could answer, the temperature plunged. It wasn't a gradual chill. It hit like a body blow, like falling into an icy lake. The wind started as a whisper through the pines, then with terrifying speed grew into a low, hollow moan that seemed to rise from the valley itself. The sun didn't set. It was choked out. Snow began to fall, not in flakes, but as a solid wall of white that descended and erased the world. "Back to the truck now!" I yelled, but the words were ripped from my mouth. Visibility dropped to arm's length. The snow was so thick it seemed to swallow sound, leaving only the deep, groaning howl of the wind. Panic, cold and sharp, pricked at the edges of my confidence. This wasn't a storm. It was an ambush. Shivering violently, I pulled out my grandfather's map. Its linen backing felt brittle in my frozen hands, the paper a chart of knowledge passed down through generations. My finger, numb inside its glove, traced a line into an unfamiliar valley, a place my grandfather had marked as treacherous. There, inked decades ago, was a tiny black square. A shelter. I'd never seen it. Never had cause to look for it. "There's a cabin!" I shouted over the gale. "An old emergency shelter. It's our only shot." Marcus spat. "You're trusting a doodle on that old relic?" "We follow the map." Arthur's voice cut through, tight with fear. "Or we die here." Arthur's words hung in the air, a final, grim verdict. There was no more arguing. Marcus shot me a look of pure poison, then turned and fell into line behind me, his shoulders hunched against the wind. The world shrank to the steady white circle of my headlamp beam cutting through the flimsy map case, the trembling compass needle in my hand, and the raw sound of my own breathing, fighting for air. Every step was a gamble, plunging blindly into hidden drifts, the cold biting deeper than any animal. It felt less like weather and more like something alive, trying to peel the life straight from our bones. It took another hour, maybe two. Time lost all meaning. Then, a shape began to form through the white chaos, a solid, dark angle against the featureless snow. A roofline. The cabin. Just where my grandfather's ink had promised. A squat block of dark, ancient-looking logs, nearly buried under a mountain of snowdrift. It looked older than the rock around us, a fossilized thing that shouldn't still be standing. The door was a single thick slab of wood, no handle, just a short leather loop to pull. It took all three of us, shoving against the frantic wind and the dead weight of the wood, to force it open. We tumbled inside, falling away from the deafening roar of the storm into a pocket of absolute crushing silence. The air inside was still and chilly, but blessedly free of the wind's cruel sting. A stack of perfectly dry firewood stood ready beside a stone fireplace. On a rough-cut shelf, a kerosene lantern sat full and waiting. Next to that, rows of canned goods, their old, faded labels still legible. I felt a wave of cold, sharp thankfulness, washed away instantly by a deep, crawling unease. This place shouldn't be here. As Arthur heaved the heavy door shut with a grinding thud, the beam of my headlamp lit up the words. They were carved roughly into the wood of the door's inner face. "Replace what you take. Leave more than you found. He counts." "The hell is that supposed to be?" Marcus mocked, but his voice cracked. Arthur just stared, his face ghostly white. We got a fire going. The flames popped and fought back some of the cabin's smothering quiet. We ate cold beans, straight from the can, the metallic taste a cheap price for the warmth hitting my core. Exhaustion slammed into me like a hammerhead. While spreading out our bedrolls, I caught Marcus shifting. There, in the jumpy firelight, his movements were quick and sneaky. He palmed a small can, peaches I figured, and pushed it deep into his pack. He put nothing back in its place. My gut knotted. I wanted to speak up, tell him to put it back right where he found it, but my arms and legs felt like bags of sand. It's one can, I argued weakly with myself. It doesn't matter. But as I closed my eyes, listening to the others breathe and the deep, dead silence of the room, I knew, with sickening certainty, that it did matter. A chill deeper than any mountain storm settled over my heart. A debt had just been opened. I woke to a stillness deeper than the muffled quiet of the storm. The fire had burned down to a bed of pale embers, and a weak, gray light filtered through the single dusty window pane. The world outside looked frozen. Arthur was already stirring, but Marcus was still snoring, a low, guttural sound. The dread from last night stuck to me like frost. We stepped outside into a world made new. The sky was a brilliant, cloudless blue. The blizzard had vanished as completely as if it had never happened, leaving behind a perfect blanket of snow 3 feet deep, glittering under the morning sun. There was no wind, not even a whisper. The air was sharp and cold and perfectly still. "See," Marcus said, clapping his gloved hands together. "Just a little mountain squall. Told you it was nothing." But it felt like something. It felt like we'd woken up inside a photograph. We started hiking, heading back the way we'd come. The snow crunched loudly under our boots, the only sound in the entire valley. The silence started to feel heavy, suffocating. After an hour of steady travel, a knot of pure dread tightened in my stomach. I stopped. "What is it?" Arthur asked, his breath turning to fog in the air. "Just checking something," I lied, turning around. My heart went cold. Behind us, the snow was a perfect, unbroken sheet, stretching all the way back to the dark line of trees that hid the cabin. Our tracks were gone, not filled in, not drifted over. They had been erased. It was like we had been placed here from above, leaving no trace we'd ever walked. A quiet, frantic buzzing started in my head. I yanked off my gloves, my fingers clumsy on the clasps of my pack, and pulled out my grandfather's map. It was my anchor, the one solid truth I still held on to. I unfolded the worn linen paper, my eyes racing to find the small black square near Serenity Creek. It wasn't there. The paper was smooth and unmarked. No symbol, no smudge, nothing to show a cabin had ever been drawn in that spot. My blood felt like ice water moving through me. But then I spotted it. Just a little to the west of where the shelter should have been, there was a new symbol, one I hadn't seen before. It was drawn in the same faded brown ink as my grandfather's oldest notes, like it had been there 100 years. It was a crude, simple outline of a hand, and it had 6 fingers. I folded the map and slid it back into my jacket, the crackle of old linen loud in the dead air. My hand trembled, but I forced it steady. I couldn't let them see. Not yet. Panic is a contagion, and in a place like this, it's a death sentence. "What is it? What did you see?" Arthur's voice was thin, his breath pluming in the unnaturally cold air. "Nothing," I lied, my own voice sounding hollow. "Just getting my bearings. We head north-northeast. Keep the sun over our left shoulder." But as we pushed on, a deeper, colder dread than the morning air began to settle in my gut. The landscape was wrong, not in big ways, but in 1,000 small details that screamed at my guide's nature. The ridgeline to the east felt closer. The familiar shape between two peaks I'd used as a landmark for years had flattened into a long, strange spine of rock. A creek I knew should be cutting through the next draw was just gone, replaced by a silent, snow-filled dip. It wasn't just that I was lost, it felt like the world I knew was lost and this other wrong version had been slid into its place. Then Marcus started complaining. "God, my hand is freezing," he muttered, shaking his right hand hard. We were all cold, but he seemed stuck on it. "It's like the cold is inside the bone." An hour later, it was all he could talk about. He stopped every 20 minutes to beat his gloved right hand against his thigh. His friendly, arrogant talk from the day before had turned sour, boiling over into suspicion and anger. "This is your fault, Carter," he snarled, stopping to glare at me. His face was pale, his eyes wide and strange. "You and your damn ghost story map. You took us off trail. You got us lost on purpose, didn't you?" "Marcus, calm down," Arthur pleaded, his voice shaking. He's trying nothing," Marcus shouted, his voice cracking. He took a threatening step toward me. "My hand. There's something wrong with my hand. It feels heavy." He stared down at his glove, his face twisted with confusion and rage. "It doesn't feel like my hand anymore." We stood frozen in a triangle of fear, the distorted forest pressing its heavy silence down on us. The only sound was Marcus's ragged breathing. He cradled his right arm, his face pale and slick with sweat despite the freezing cold. For another long, terrible minute, he just stared at the glove, like it was some poisonous thing latched onto him. The anger had vanished, replaced by raw animal panic. "Get it off!" he choked out, the words a ragged plea to the empty air. He fumbled at the glove's wrist with his left hand, fingers clumsy and shaking. He couldn't get a grip. With a muffled sob, desperate, he bit into the leather cuff and tore it off. Arthur screamed, a high, thin sound scraping the air, and stumbled backwards, tripping over a root and sprawling into the snow. I understood. Marcus's hand was waxy and shockingly black, the color of rotting meat and deep frostbite. But the skin wasn't broken or blistered. It was unnervingly smooth, tight, and cold-looking, like polished dark glass. And sprouting from the side of his palm, just below his little finger, was a sixth finger. It was too long and thin, withered like a dried root, just as dead black as the rest of the hand. At its tip, a cracked yellow nail caught the light like a piece of old bone. Marcus gaped at the thing growing from him, his mouth wide in silent horror. My stomach twisted and I yanked my grandfather's map from my coat. My eyes flew to the spot where the cabin symbol should be. The crude, six-fingered hand sketched in its place seemed to glare back. The connection hit me so hard I almost doubled over. Replace what you take, leave more than you found. A wave of icy dread washed through me as the truth clicked into place. He doesn't just count the cans, he collects the debt.